Hello and welcome back. Today I am going to be watching a How Do They Teach the American Revolution in Britain? So I'm curious, of course, the Revolution, the United States versus Britain back in the day, just how they teach it. I've seen lots of movies. Patriot is one of my favorite movies. And yeah, just how do they teach it compared to what we learned in school in the United States here, and just to compare and give you my thoughts of what do we learn, how do we learn it, how do we see Britain, and vice versa. So this is kind of their take on us, I assume. So we'll find out, and I'll give you my thoughts. Let's jump in here.
The American Revolution is one of the historical events that, together with things like the French Revolution, among other things, helped usher in the modern era. The Americans, on the whole, tend to be proud of this event and focus on it heavily in their school curriculum.
This is random. Sorry I'm pausing so early, but something that blew my mind when I was not even young, just teenager, I guess, was just the time frame. You think of everything, at least over here in the US, of everything happening in Europe, which is like so back in the day. But the fact that the United States, the revolution happened before the French Revolution, I think we kind of triggered, in a way, maybe not, but seems like we kind of triggered kind of like a worldwide or a European-wide overthrowing the throne in a way, getting rid of the monarchies. A lot of monarchies back in the day, in these days, back in the Revolution. So it just was kind of crazy learning that the American Revolution happened, and France helped us, and then very shortly after, the French Revolution happened, which is just absolutely crazy. It seems like for us, happened so long ago, way before the American Revolution. So just a random thought from an American.
As it heralds the birth of their nation and the triumph of a handful of terrorists against their government and fellow countrymen. But what do schools in Britain have to say about the American Revolution?
Yes.
To begin with, on the surface, if one talks to people on the street or reads a British book on the subject, Americans will perhaps be positively surprised to see that today there are no hard feelings in England regarding the Americans' choice to leave the glorious British Empire. May it reign forever.
Long-time friends now.
But really, we don't care. It seems like a peachy divorce with no grudges held or hostile views taken. After all, for the last century at least, the UK has been the closest ally of the US in Europe, with mutual support in all major conflicts of the 20th century, and both follow similar policies so consistently that the UK has, on occasion, been ironically referred to as the 52nd state. But there is a catch. While the American Revolution is a cornerstone of American history, in Britain, well, it's...
And this is a very famous picture in the US, and I love this picture.
It seems that the subject of the American War of Independence, as it is known in the UK, is rarely mentioned in British education books of past and present, or at least not in any great detail. That's not to say it's not mentioned anywhere, simply that while they may learn a little about early American history, including the War of Independence, it's more of a footnote in British history. It's probably also worth mentioning that when it is mentioned, it is never seen from a nationalistic point of view. For example, we don't angrily shake our fists at a picture of Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. Rather, it's covered frankly, and then we...
Yeah, we don't do the same thing to, King George, so... Same thing.
Move on swiftly to more interesting and relevant subjects to British history. For example, the focus in history is much more centered around things like the Roman times. For example, the legendary resistance of Queen Boudicca against the might of Rome, or later periods such as the 100 Years' War and the intrigues of the Tudors generally trying to keep track of all the beheadings in the Tower of London. In more modern times, emphasis is put on issues such as industrialization, colonialism, and the
By the way, Tower of London was amazing. If you go to England, go to the Tower of London. That place, I could have spent easily, we spent like one day, like a partial day in there, but I could have went back 2 days in there. The crown jewels, just like you said, the beheadings, obviously they don't advertise that there. They have the Roman wall just outside, I believe. A million other things are there.
post-colonization era, as well as the events during the world wars and internal reforms. As to the aggression of the British Empire, while many certainly complain that it's not fully represented, it is far from omitted. British imperialism, for example, in Africa, is of course addressed. So why not focus on the American War of Independence and the birth of one of the most influential nations in modern history? It seems that the lack of details when teaching about American independence is not due to shame, envy, or part of a continuous effort to hide the UK's colonial past, as, say, the case might be in Japan. Rather, the main reason is the unspectacularly trivial fact that the American Revolution is seen as a minor detail in comparison to other events directly related to British history. The US breaking off was simply just one of many nations that did it for a whole lot of reasons.
That's true. When you look at the map of, I forget when it was, I don't know, 50 years before Queen Elizabeth II. So something like that. It was like just before World War I or something. I know I'm wrong with this, but it's roughly around that time. They had the most expansive time during that era. How just the U.S., like, why would you focus so hard on just one of these kind of new countries breaking off and becoming independent? So yeah, I see his point.
Indeed, if one looks at the larger scope, more than 60 countries celebrate independence from the British Empire, which in its heyday had control over 1/5 of the globe's population. That would amount to, on average, one Independence Day celebration of a country every week in a given school year. A phlegmatic English answer would be to say that we have better things to focus on than every country's Independence Day. So, the American Revolution is equated with other similar events, and it is rather addressed as an armed uprising of an important but distant rural populace against taxes, so hardly unique in history. The importance of ideas such as enlightenment, freedom, and democratic values are viewed by Americans on the basis of their revolution as one prime example thereof. But the schools in the UK, similar to most European countries, focus on other incidents. Some of them are closer to home and widely acknowledged as shaping history, such as the French Revolution. Another example is the post-colonialism era in Asia and Africa as one of the main facets of world history. These, rather than American independence, are considered to provide the historical depth necessary for such discussions in the UK classrooms. Thus, the War of American Independence will most likely come up as an addendum, providing context when dealing with the French Revolution or with trade regulations within the British Empire as an example of a taxation policy gone wrong. It can also be related to the long-term effects of the 7 Years' War, which may be considered one of the causes that would eventually lead to the higher taxation that in turn ignited the revolutionary actions in the Americas.
It seemed like they're always at war. They're always just spending tons of money. Some of their kings were not the greatest, I guess, especially with their finances, and they just taxed us because, we're just, colonists and whatever, just tax them more and let's get on with our wars. That's one of the things that I've heard and what he kind of brought up.
Of course, that does not mean that American history is shunned from British schools, far from it. The developments of civic rights, the role of American industrialization, and the combined efforts with the British in the World Wars and the Cold War are placed highly in various stages of the curriculum, be it in the early key stages of the English system or adapted for older students of 15 to 18 years, such as during the A-level and GCSE exams. To give an example within the history books provided by AQA, that's a blast from the past. Out of more than 30 titles covering the period from the Crusades up to the 21st century, 2 refer directly to the USA. The Making of a Superpower, USA, 1865 to 1975, and The American Dream, Reality and Illusion, 1945 to 1980. The titles are indicative of the thematic stressed in each book. Notice that there is no book specifically dealing with the USA before 1861. Besides these reasons, the lack of emphasis on the American Revolution could be seen as related to the political scene within the UK itself. The UK is regarded by some as a fragile nation, as emphasized by much talk of independence by individual regions, especially in the last decade. The independence of a mainly English-speaking American colony, which is also culturally related to England, is much more on par with the Scottish or North Irish independence movements than, say, the Indian independence of 1947. But to sum up, in general, the American Revolution is not negatively portrayed in British schools, as some might first assume. Rather, it is seen as one of many world history events which are linked to the understanding and teaching of UK history.
Yeah, this is the same thing, I guess, with the United States. We don't look down or poorly on England about the revolution, especially nowadays. I don't think anyone cares about it anymore of grudges or anything so long ago. And like I said earlier, we're just like the best of friends now for country wise. But yeah, you don't learn, it's like they're doing anything bad. They don't have other than like the taxes, you don't really hear about them being, brutal to us or anything, or treating us overly poorly or poorly at all. I'm sure there's stories, but I mean, I always grew up just thinking that they are more, sophisticated, where these farmers over here in the U.S. and we kind of rose up with our pitchforks and militias and everything, whereas England was top notch, very like gentlemanly, I guess, how they do wars and everything, honorable. That's kind of how I've always seen them, and just generally how they teach you in school. And then we as Americans kind of got these guerrilla tactics going on later, and kind of changed the way that war is waged and done. So that's a whole nother video I need to dive into.
Without being particularly vital to it, and thus not really worth covering in depth. And I'll just add on a personal note here that when we started doing this series of how is so-and-so taught in another part of the world, someone asked me this on Twitter, and my response is it's just not taught. We don't really look at it. And well, now you've had the more in-depth answer. Bonus fact. Ever wonder what the difference between the UK, England, and Great Britain is? Honestly, yes, sometimes, even as a British man. The actual name of the sovereign state we are talking about here is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the UK. The United Kingdom is made up of the countries England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The confusion of the terms seems to revolve around the term country and the political powers that are perceived based on that word. While the four countries that make up the UK are generally considered separate in the minds of locals, and in certain sporting events, their powers for local law and control are devolved from the UK. Think of the 50 states of the United States. While each state has their own set of laws, they are all under the power of the federal government. In the case of the UK, it is somewhat similar, though certain responsibilities are also implied, like healthcare and education, that are delegated to 3 of the 4 countries. The responsibilities that are delegated differ from one country to the next. England is the only country in which the UK does not devolve any powers, and instead it is legislated directly by the UK government. When it comes to international politics, it is the sovereign nation of the UK that is recognised, and not any of the 4 constituent countries. The term Great Britain refers to the landmass that comprises England, Scotland, and Wales. Since the UK's Olympic team competes under the name Great Britain, and the ISO, International Organisation for Standardisation, gives the UK the country codes of GB and GBR. This can be confusing given that the ISO also codes England, Scotland, and Wales as subdivision countries of the UK, but Northern Ireland as a subdivision province. If you're getting the impression that Northern Ireland is the red-headed stepchild of the UK, you may be right, both figuratively and literally, we suppose. The confusion over the definition of these 4 countries in reference to the UK is further muddied up in sporting competitions. There are several international sporting events like the Commonwealth Games and football competitions in which each of the 4 has their own team, and they do not compete under a unified national team. When competing under these conditions, their nations are referred to as home nations. Because each team is from a specific home country, it can lead some to think that these countries have political autonomy as well. If you're curious about when these unions between the countries that comprise the UK came about, it happened as follows. England and Wales were joined in 1536. Scotland and England were joined together in 1707, along with the previously joined Wales, to officially form the Kingdom of Great Britain. Ireland decided to join up in 1801, at which point the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland was formed. In 1922, however, many of the southern counties of Ireland decided to remove themselves from the Union, and the UK changed their name to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So, in summary, Great Britain is England, Scotland, and Wales. The UK is England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and the full name is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. England is just the part of the island that is England. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, check out our great sponsor, The Great Course.
Yeah, so if us Americans confuse that, we're sorry. That's pretty confusing anyways. It's not the most simple thing to try to understand right off the bat. Takes a little bit, especially living there. That was very entertaining. I always like these videos, and I'm gonna do a lot more of these of how does one country look at another country's, historical events or whatnot. Because I find how, Europeans or someone from another country looking at things at the US, it's like so common over here. We're just talking about the revolution, like this is a perfect example. And other videos like this, I want to do a lot more of hearing your perspective and then comparing them and letting you know our perspective as, Americans, or even down to a Californian. So I'll be doing a lot more of these. I found a few that I want to do that are very interesting, very, history ridden, and we will do those soon. And I want to hear more suggestions for one, especially, if you want my opinion about something. And yeah, we'll jump into more of these, and I want to hear everything about it. More suggestions, more about what they say in the video, or if you are an American, join me in talking about what they're talking about, or our experiences, etc., etc. So until next time, keep on learning, keep on watching these videos, and I'll do the same and react. So until next time, thanks for watching. That was very.